Bertha Loaiza is a first-generation Mexican-American who works towards mental health awareness and suicide prevention. Bertha is known as the Miracle Girl. Her own personal journey of survival and resilience is what has guided her in her mission, and she joins me to share her story and discuss her important work. Welcome, Bertha, and thank you for coming on Bradshaw Live.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So you were raised by your maternal grandparents since you were a toddler. Can you tell me what you knew about your mom growing up?
Yes, my mother, along with her siblings and my grandparents, immigrated from Mexico. So I was raised by my maternal grandparents. And as I realized that there was one person missing, my mother, they spoke of her. They spoke of an accident that we were both in. She lost her life. I didn't. And everything seemed well. So I didn't have any reason to question, Well, I understood at some point that that's the circle of life. People pass away sometimes. There's terrible accidents, but I was lucky to be surrounded by a lot of love and a lot of people. So I just went on.
But you discovered that that was not necessarily the case. It was not an accident, that your mom actually committed suicide. How did you find that out?
Yeah, I found out that my mom died by suicide at the age of 17. And it was a recording of a newscast that was doing a follow-up story on my recovery. When I watched the VHS of the news recording, I learned that my mother, at the age of 23, was holding me in her arms as she went over one of our local bridges here, which is over 200 feet.
Did you know that you were injured as a result of your mom committed suicide, or you were a baby and you had no recollection that you even had an injury?
I did. I suffered many injuries, many permanent injuries from that when my mom died by suicide. I mean, I went to a lot of doctor's appointments and, I had all these eyeglasses and patches and scars that were explained by my mother and I being in an accident where she lost her life and I didn't.
She jumped off the bridge with you in her arms as a 3-year-old. How did you survive?
Brad, that is a $1,000,000 question. Ultimately, I believe she did save me because she did take most of the hit when we hit the water, but I believe I was saved, that my life was spared because to be able to do wonderful work in the community with people like yourself.
What were your injuries at the time? I assume you still have no recollection to this day, correct?
No, I don't remember that day. I remember being in the hospital, recovery, and years of follow-up appointments with doctors. I had trauma. I had cataract trauma to my right eye, so I lost most of my vision in my right eye, collapsed lungs, shattered pelvic and hip that I have surgically corrected now. I had a total hip replacement 3 years ago. So I was living with that pain, with that, bone pain in the last few years.
Now, you're called the Miracle Girl because you're the first person ever to go over this particular 246-foot bridge and live.
I was up until that point.
What is the name of the bridge?
It's the San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge. It goes over the San Diego Bay, so it links the city of San Diego to Coronado Island.
And you find this VHS. Were you angry with your grandparents? You say, how did you keep this from me?
Honestly, I've never been angry about the way I found out. I watched it probably 200 times over and over and over, initially thinking it was some sort of an audio problem, where the video is going, but the audio didn't match. So I thought the story didn't match because that wasn't the story that I knew. So after, a bunch of times watching it, and I realized that was what really happened because it was being televised in our local news. I felt everything. I think I was sad because I felt more of a disconnect with my mother because I felt bad that I wasn't aware of mental illness. If there was anything I could have done at 3 years old to help her pain, I was confused because I didn't understand at that point what all mental health entailed, what suicide really was. And then how would a 3-year-old child that the mother adored, why would I be involved?
Who was the first people that you went to and said, oh my God, I found this horrible information that was kept from me, that my mother jumped off a bridge with me in her arms?
I couldn't believe it. I did approach my family, and I felt bad by doing so because I knew that by me bringing it up, they were going to relive the pain of losing my mother. So I was very careful on how I did it because I didn't want to bring more pain, but I wanted to understand. So I did, slowly started telling everybody, I found the VHS of the recording. I know what really happened. You don't need to explain anything to me. Let me process it, and we'll go through it, one day at a time. And my family was very supportive. They even apologized because they said, we're sorry we didn't tell you sooner. I said, no, no, no. I found out when I was supposed to find out. I'm glad. It was hard for me to accept that after all these years of knowing, seeing pictures, hearing stories of my mother and mine interaction for the 3 years that I did spend with her, I refused to believe that she tried to kill me or even herself. I went into, let's say, more of a detective mode than less of a depressed mode. But it was one of those things that I had to learn more about. I had to figure out why somebody would get to that point, and at random times it would hit me, and it would make me sad for my mother that she didn't have access or enough resources or just enough help to get through this.
What did you find out about your mom and her depression and what she was suffering and why she chose to take her life and tried to take your life as well?
That's the thing with suicide. We'll never have a concrete answer because it does take usually many factors through a long period of time to get to that fatal result. But my mother, I know, coming into a new country, I'm sure that didn't make it easy. Being the oldest of four, I'm sure that didn't help. And then being a young mother, a failed young marriage, to my father. I mean, that's all hearsay and things because she's not here to explain that.
Do you today forgive your mom?
My mother is not at fault. I don't blame my mother. I know that it wasn't her. I know that it wasn't her in her right mind that chose to do any of this. I believe she held me because she loved me. I know she didn't want to hurt me. And in my heart, I do believe that there may have been some sort of moment of clarity at the end where she did guard me from most of the hit when we did fall into the water.
Now this learning this, I guess, put you on a trajectory to what you do today. You run a program, Survivors of Suicide Loss.
Yeah, Survivors of Suicide Loss is a local nonprofit here in San Diego. We offer support services for anybody that's lost a loved one to suicide. And those services include support groups, reaching out. We have community events where up until COVID, we would interact with one another and create, little things to remember, arts and crafts, activities, go out by the bay, different things to remember our loved one's life, because we have to remember how they lived, not how they died, because suicide is a result of mental illness. We know this now in 2020.
Do you think Trump's policies and treatment of immigrants has made the process more traumatic for immigration, perhaps even increased suicide and depression amongst people? Have you seen that in your work?
Not specifically. I mean, we try not to bring politics into it specifically, but I am aware, living in San Diego, being a border town, and it's hard. It's hard when I speak to other families. It is, the stresses that families of coworkers or friends are suffering, because of new restrictions or new laws.
Are there programs available at survivors of suicide loss for asylum seekers, undocumented immigrants? Are there specific programs available for people?
The wonderful thing about survivors of suicide loss is that everybody is welcome. Not going to check your legal status or, any of that situation. We all are grieving the same loss, which was a loved one to suicide, and we help each other grow through that grief and remember our loved ones in a positive way.
Now, within the general Latino community and really the immigrant community as a whole, there is a lot of cultural resistance, especially for people who are not born in the United States, to go to therapy, to admit they have a problem, to recognize that they're suffering through depression. Why do you think that is?
Nobody wants to be looked at weak or crazy. Those are terms that we have for many, many years been accustomed to relate to when it comes to seeking help for mental illness. But it should not be any different than seeking help for any other medical condition.
Have you seen an uptick in depression recently?
I have. I think the factors include, everybody being locked up at home, the quarantine rules being so strict for our own safety and health, of course.
What are some of the warning signs if, you're with a loved one or a friend or a colleague to see if somebody may be suicidal and they need help?
Some of the more common signs, if you or your loved one may be depressed or suicidal, would be feeling sense of not being able to provide for your family, feeling worthless, thinking more about death and how maybe everybody around you would be, better off without you, which all of those are untrue. Some of the more uncommon that people may not usually relate to would be maybe overworking, or not wanting to work, prolonged periods of times of changes in their normal routine behavior would be a warning sign. Every threat should be taken seriously because it's better to be wrong and still be alive than the opposite. It is very important that if you see that in somebody else, you ask them, are you thinking of taking your life, not hurting yourself, but are you seriously thinking of taking your life? The only way that we can open up and be more honest is if our communication is honest with one another. There's no time when we're speaking of a life, there's no time to waste. Just ask, are you thinking of taking your life?
What are the national hotline numbers somebody can call to get help right now?
If anybody needs help right now, the best number to call, if you're in imminent danger or you feel like you or somebody else is in imminent danger, call 911. For suicidal thoughts, call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255.
And if somebody wanted to follow you or find out more about your work, how would they reach out to you?
They could call our local number for resource non-emergency number, 619-482-0297, or visit our website at soslsd.org.
So Bertha, you have, by all accounts, a miracle story in the sense that you had a second opportunity at life, because you could have had life taken away from you before you even knew what life was as a 3-year-old. How do you feel about yourself today?
I am thankful to wake up every day, to be able to see a new sunrise, to be able to spend with my children. I was I was able to I was given life, a second chance at life, and I was able to produce life and be able to speak with people like yourself. And I mean, how could I not be thankful?
And finally, this is a show about achieving your American dream. Tell me, what is your American dream? Have you achieved it? Uh,
I mean, it really wasn't up until a couple of years ago that I realized the importance of being able to come out and sharing my story. So I found my American dream mid 30s, and but now I'm trying to continue living a good life, a healthy life, so that we can be happy. And my dream, just coming out and being able to, even if others use my story as an icebreaker for a conversation, but the fact that they're able to do that, to bring up mental illness maybe in a private family dinner, I mean, that's all I could ask for. I just want everybody to just live their life, and I don't want to lose any more lives to suicide or mental illness.
Bertha Loaiza, thank you. You are certainly the miracle that you're here, miracle of what you're doing to help people. You're doing wonderful work. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for providing this really necessary help for so many people who are suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for all that you do.
Okay, thank you.